Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast, where we help combat the negativity that inundates our daily lives with a positive perspective and positive action. Today's guest is Alain Dumonceaux. It is said that there are three ways we learn wisdom. The first is through reflection, the second through imitation, and finally through experience. Regardless of how we gain our wisdom, the lessons learned only become embodied when we can recognize the connection between wisdom and purpose. That journey requires us to unpack some uncomfortable stuff, and only the brave are willing to do. So after fighting the imposter syndrome, rebuilding life after divorce and bankruptcy, our guests learned to live a purposeful life and show other men the value of living their highest vision and serving others with passion, purpose, and power. So please welcome to the show, Alain Dumonceaux. Alain, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks so much, Bob, for having me on the show. Nice to be able to get a chance to be on this side of the microphone for a change. So looking forward to our conversation.
Well, great. Well, let's get right into it and let people know about who you are. How did you get to where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how far back we'll go, but I'll just give a little brief history as I'm looking at just over my my left shoulder here. And early in the early 90s, I was a chef in my career, and I really enjoyed that work. And I'm a little bit older guy, 57, so I was in the I was watching guys like the Galloping Gourmet in North America here, and then Three's Company, with Jack Tripper, living with two beautiful women. I thought, wow, what a great career. And so anyways, that never ended up by panning out that way. But what my career did end up by panning out is I actually competed in the World Culinary Olympics in the early 90s.
Cool.
And you got to remember, this is way before there was food TV and Bobby Flay and Iron Chef and all those cool things, right? And what I learned from that experience was that, when you really put your mind towards something and you work with a group of individuals, you can grow and learn so much as an individual. But the other side of that coin is that because there was so much focus on one part of my life, it actually ended up by costing me my marriage, and that's where the divorce and the bankruptcy and everything came through. And so it started my journey on personal development back then. And it was really the catalyst that started working forward. And I can remember, she's my wife today, but I met this lady about a year after that, and she introduced me to Jack Canfield.
Yeah.
And he had a set of tape series called Self-Esteem and Peak Performance. I don't know if you remember that old series. And I think it was a Nightingale Conant. And I listened to that thing, and wore all 6 of those tapes out.
Yeah.
And, but it was part of that process. And what I learned through that journey was that, we need to have balance in our life, and balance meaning that we need to have attention in all aspects of it. But I really didn't put things into practice, and it almost cost me my current marriage. And thankfully, my wife said, we're still together today. She saw the man inside of me that I was yet to reveal to myself. And so she gave me the opportunity to really put into practice everything that I learned. And that's where this idea of living with purpose and power and passion really came forward. And so we live today now with intention of what it is that we're looking to accomplish, and making sure that we touch all aspects of our life, not just our career or hobbies or something else, but how do we bring it all together in a unified purpose? So that's really a bit of the basis of where it all started. And, hopefully, it gives you an idea.
Yeah, no, that really helps. And I think it's interesting because you mentioned a couple of things. I started, my self, if you will, help type instruction with the cassette tapes and so forth, and wearing them out in the car. Those big manuals. But one of the other things that got me on what you said is the focus on who we are as a person. I think it's important, no matter what we do, and I talk to groups about this, we're people first.
Yes.
And that involves a whole lot of stuff. I mean, people coming to a job that they may be very well at there may have kids that or they're having trouble with, or like you said, maybe on the other side, having trouble with a marriage or a health issue with parents or something. We bring all that with us. How do you help people to, not only realize that that's all part of the package, but break down and to be able to focus on some of those things? Because it's a lot sometimes.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it sure is, Bob. And so one of the things that we do with the men here at the Awakened Man is we put them through what I call an integrity challenge. And really what this integrity challenge does is takes them through, we have 6 life pillars: financial, emotional, physical, spiritual, professional, and our relationships.
Okay.
And after they go through this, it's a simple, there's 4 to 6 questions within each of those areas. And then what it does, it gives it a score. They'll give themselves a score, and we get an idea of which ones are truly lacking the attention and the focus that they need. And then from there, we can start to build out a plan. And so they need to really understand where they're coming, what it's coming from. And I asked them to do this integrity challenge as a complete package, instead of just saying, well, I think I really need to work on my relationship. And they probably do, but it's going to show up in other aspects as well in their life. And so we get them to dial into looking at their life as a totality, and get them to learn to think like that. Because, as guys, we can really, what do they call that? Compartmentalize things, right?
Oh yeah.
We have our little silos.
Yeah.
And we don't tend, none of those should they ever meet. I can remember my son when he was little, right? God forbid the peas touch the carrots, and okay, buddy. And as guys, we need to understand that we have to have all perspectives in place. And then we start to dive into looking at values and limiting beliefs. We really start to unpack these things, because we carry these values from way back. And some of us are carrying, and to me, especially for me, I found it while doing this work for myself, I was still carrying values of when I was a teenager.
Right.
And they served me then, but they didn't serve me today. And so did it mean that I needed to change the value? Some of them did, but some of them I just needed to reframe what it means to me today. And how does it look in that complete picture? And so we really those are really the first 3 steps. And once we start doing that, then the work starts to, okay, how do we start to embody this person that we truly desire to become?
Right.
And when we do that, then we at least have a focal point. So that's how we really start off. It really comes down to and I call it an integrity challenge, because to me, it truly is. Are we in alignment in all aspects of our life, or are we just living from one particular pillar?
Well, and I find it interesting too. You got to take that time to do that. That's, I think, hard for a lot of people. Is, okay, it's not going to be something you do in 15 minutes. It really isn't. No. How do you help people to do that, to focus that time out? Do you recommend taking a vacation day, 2 days? How can you help people with that?
Yeah. So what we do is we put them through, when I give them this work to do, we have regular check-ins now. So there's 2 different streams they can work with us, right? So they can work in a group mentorship program. So I have this group, band of brothers. We meet monthly, and it's in that opportunity. There's 2 meetings a month where we get a chance we learn about a topic for ourselves to help drive home some lessons within those 6 pillars of life, but also to get an opportunity to come forward and talk about what it is that's on your mind today. What are you working towards? And to get the help and the guidance from other brothers and as a group. The other way to do it, if you're really serious about getting in, and I'm not saying that you're not serious doing the band of brothers, you are, but if you really want to dive into it, then you go on, you take what we call our hero's quest. And when you participate in that, you're going to get 6 check-ins. It's really intense the first 90 days, because the idea is I want to make sure you're staying on track. And so there's a high level of accountability at the start to get the momentum going. And once you start that momentum going, then the check-ins as we go through the rest of that year for that program, then they start to see things change. And so you still got to do the work on your own.
Yeah.
But there's 2 different ways you can get your accountability. You can either do it in a group format, on a monthly basis, or if you really want a little bit extra push, a little extra guidance, then you look at a more intense program. And I find that the guys that are most successful, you participate in both of those programs, because if you do the Heroes Quest, you're going to be involved automatically with the group program. And that's when you really get to find and work with guys, and you realize that, man, I didn't realize that Bob having the same struggle that I'm having. Wow. Right. So I'm not alone in this thing. There's somebody else that's dealing with this stuff.
Yeah,
that's right, buddy. There's somebody else here that's living through it. Maybe not exactly, but we're all going through very similar things.
Well, and that brings up a good point, because you mentioned a couple of things, like guys like to compartmentalize things and, nothing will touch, and realizing that others are going through this, because we get so focused on the task at hand, we forget there's other. What are 4 things you think men are lacking, and does this program bring that out? And the word lacking, I don't think is a derogatory term, but we're not focused on it. Let's say that.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Well, I found, and I came up with these 4 things that we lack because they were the things that I was that I was finding that was missing in my life. And so the first thing that we lack is that we lack commitment. We think that, and one of the things that I'm challenging myself with this year was my commitment to be for health and well-being.
Okay.
So I've been very good at from the mental health perspective and working on that and career. But I have to be honest with you, it's time to get rid of dad bod. It's really time to focus in and doing that. So commitment. So it's taken 40 plus years to get to this place. Hey, going to the gym once a week isn't necessarily going to make it work, isn't going to make a big change. So we got to be committed. Are you committed to making your change? So that means, what do you know what your why is? Why are you willing to take this step forward? So the next thing we also lack is, we lack clarity, because when I ask that question, do you know why you're doing it? A lot of times I don't know why I'm doing it.
My wife told me to.
Things. Yeah, right. And so when we can get some clarity in our life, then we can become more committed to what we're doing. And one of the ways that I do that is I ask guys to complete the sentence. I'm the kind of man who, and then whatever you put at the end of that, that's the person that you're attempting to embody. Right. And you start to act, feel, and do those things, what that individual does. So those are the first 2. The third thing is that we lack a compass, meaning we don't have a direction. That's what a compass does for us, right? It gives us direction. It provides us a true North Star. So it's really about completing a vision statement. We do that in business. Those of us that are involved in business, vision and mission statements are part of the norm. But for personal, do we actually have a vision for ourselves, an idea of what it is that we're aspiring to become? And then the last thing that we lack is we truly lack a community of brothers to help us to not only just help lift us into other higher spaces, but also to hold us accountable with compassion and purpose, because they can see inside of us what we don't always see inside of ourselves, just like my wife was able to do for myself. And so those are the 4 keys. And I recognize that those things are the stuff that I was truly lacking in my life. I hadn't put any attention on. And as soon as I started to, life started to change dramatically for me, because there was now purpose and direction.
And that's really interesting too. I mean, it's the thing I like about that group scenario is it seems comfortable. It seems like I've been part of men's groups, where iron sharpens iron scenarios. Those are, it's good because we are, get out of the way, I'll do it myself. That's what guys kind of do. And realizing others do go through these things are so important. And you can help lift somebody else up. I think that's so critical, that you're able to do that with people. And these 4 items, I mean, wow, whether you want a minute or not. Yeah, I think we all can use work on those. So
yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, what is purposeful action? You mentioned that a few times.
Yeah. And to me, purposeful action is truly starting with intention. And so why am I, and that question is, why am I doing this today? And it's, and it can be to the most mundane, but really when you look at after you've completed an integrity challenge, a check for yourself, like for me, for example, and I'll go back to the health in my body and taking care of that. Then when I was starting to have really sore back pain and, getting the MRIs done and seeing that there was a little bit of fragmentation there, I realized that I needed to make a change. And so for me, my sinful pleasure is salty food. And so, at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, I like to have a little snack. Well, what is the purpose of me doing that? And so start to question why it is that I'm doing that. Is this truly what I need right now? Or has it become a habit? Yeah. And I can make better, healthier choices to do something different than what I would normally do and just be, just kind of sleepwalking through life and just doing the same old routine and then wondering why I'm not having a different result. And so it's really about looking at those pieces of our lives that we're challenged with and saying, what is the intention of me? If I take this action, what is the potential outcome of this? And it helps to keep us on track with our vision and our goal of what it is that we're trying to accomplish and become in our lives.
It's interesting as you're talking about that, I have to smile because I think of fairs, the state fair, you don't see too many skinny people at some of these. And I'm thinking, that's, I'm just thinking heart attack on a bone here, heart attack over here. I'm just like, ugh. It really puts it in perspective for you that says, maybe you don't want to go down that road and, you know, we'll eat that, all that stuff once in a while. Okay, I get it, but we got to be here for a long time, we hope. And so why not make the best of it? Why not keep your body in good shape? Why not, eat the right things? It's just, there's certain things you see that maybe you don't realize are right in your face saying, hey, you don't want to do this. So I've learned to catch some of those scenarios and been able to steer my life away from some of that stuff. So
Right on. Yeah,
yeah,
and it's so easy, and we lull ourselves in, right? It's that the old adage of the devil and the angel on our shoulders. They're having the conversation, and it's really the same voice. It's just a different perspective, and it's just easy to give in because and I think it's Jocko Willink talks about choose your hard, right?
right.
Life is going to be hard some way for us. So if I
Yeah,
choose to keep eating unhealthy, not exercising, not changing the way I my lifestyle,
yeah,
then the hard is going to be poor health,
yeah,
potentially could be heart attacks, all the other things that comes with that. Or I can challenge the hardness of being able to get up at 5. I prefer to get up in the morning
yeah,
and get my day started that way. So just to get up, and sure, there's lots of mornings I don't want to get up, but you know what? If I don't, and I
yeah.
always think back, well, nothing's going to change. And I think back to reading about I think it was, I can't remember, maybe it was a Jack Canfield story, but of a lady who was in her 70s or 80s and decided she was going to be a doctor. And, I thought, well, and it's going to take me 7 years to become a doctor. So,
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to do that. But then she realized 7 years later,
Yeah.
now I'm a doctor. And
Yeah.
had she not made that choice. And so I use that practice in my mind for myself as well, thinking, well, if I don't do it in 5 years from now, what'll be the difference? Well, nothing
Right.
will change.
Right.
I'll be the same, probably worse.
The time
Or
will still continue. So
yeah, I'll accomplish something and
yeah.
become something more than I am today. And so I always think that it's important that we challenge ourselves, and doesn't mean you have to go. I'm Aries, so I like to start things and go hard in the beginning. And so I have to always remind myself, okay, don't kill yourself, Al. Just
Right.
just just get up and start the process, and
Yeah.
and just
It's a
be
marathon.
consistent.
It's not a quick little sprint around
Yeah, exactly.
like you brought up a good point. It took me 40 years to get this dad bod. Well, it's not going to happen overnight to get it off. And that can be frustrating, but at the same time, you keep at it. It's build that discipline, build that focus. That's where your strength comes in on that. So
Yeah.
interesting. There's an interesting question that I saw that seemed to come up from your information. This is what's wrong with masculinity today? And with the way our economy, the way our society is today, I think that's important because personally, your plumbing's either inside, your plumbing's outside. There's
Yeah.
not this other. It's one or the other. So I thought that was an interesting question. So what do you think it is?
Yeah, I think a masculinity is everything that we are as men. And I think the challenge is that we've lived through an era, a previous era of where masculinity was the only a portion of what we think of as men. It's the strong person.
Yeah,
It's the Rambo type, 1980s action hero. Let's go back even further. It's the Clint Eastwood through to
yeah,
the action hero type of idea. And that's who you needed to be. And the challenge is that as exciting as those movies are and how that might be perceived as being as a strength for us, it's only a small aspect of us. And so it's about changing that perspective of being, instead of having aggression,
yeah.
how can we be assertive towards things?
Right.
And then we went into this next piece, this next phase, where all of a sudden we were, oh, men need to embrace the more the softer skills and the
Yeah.
more of the what we would call the feminine side of our personality. All that says to me is that what we need to do is that it's okay to be vulnerable about things that we
Yeah.
don't care for, things that touch our heart. My wife and I went and saw Sound of Freedom last night.
Oh
I
wow.
have to be honest with you, at the start of the movie there,
Yeah.
I was bawling in the theater, and
Yeah.
I'm just sitting there going, because I have children, and I'm
Yeah.
sure if you do, Bob, right?
Yeah.
Anybody that
I,
has
I
children or grandchildren,
yeah.
you know,
I can't even. I'm not sure I can watch that movie just because of that. I would be
yeah,
a mess. I mean, it's just wow.
and so
So
I think masculinity is about being a complete and whole man with who we are. It
Yeah.
isn't about emasculation and taking rid of the aspects of us that society once said is no longer acceptable.
Yeah.
I don't buy into the idea of toxic masculinity. I buy in the idea of toxic behavior.
Hmm.
It's a behavior process. So we
Yeah.
can be masculine strong and have great presence without being aggressor. And we take this 1% of the men who seem to be this embody what would be deemed as, toxic men.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that's who all of us are. And
Right.
so
Right.
society has to move away from the idea that there isn't anything wrong with a man providing for his family,
Right. Right.
looking after and doing the things that he's to do.
Yeah.
What we need to recognize is that becoming soft, and sitting back and allowing others to do things
Yeah.
means that we're telling ourselves that we're not capable
Yeah.
of being able to take care of ourselves, let alone anyone else. And so when I think about what's happening and how we're defining masculinity, we need to be able to define how it is that we would defend our families and our communities. And that means getting smarter about how we present ourselves, how
Right.
we lean into the world, looking at all the aspects of our lives
Yeah.
and living a truly authentic life and not trying to pretend and bend and kowtow towards what society wants us to be. And so I think,
Yeah.
there isn't any one particular, this is how you need to be a man. I think there's lots of different ways that can show up. And so
One of the things you described there, to me, it reminds me of, we don't want to give away our power that we're given by our creator. I mean, we have these innate abilities, innate power. Don't give them away to others. We can direct where we want to go based on what we think is right. But I think even more, learn what is right. Learn, what works for you and your scenario and your society. That's, a better example for others coming up.
I completely agree. And I think we have, all of us have this internal compass. I'll go back and using that word that tells us when we're off course.
Yeah.
Have you ever done anything in your life where you're about to do something and you had that feeling in your gut and you just kind of thought, oh, I don't know if this is going to go over well. I'm not talking about that fear, like maybe you're going to do a presentation and stand in front of a bunch of people. I mean, something that is truly not who you are.
Right.
And you're about to take that step, right? And that's, that can show up, for guys, a lot of us, and that's why I like working with, especially with married men.
Mm-hmm.
We get to a point into our relationships and our careers where we feel that, maybe the woman I'm married to isn't the woman I shouldn't be involved with any longer, and we fail to recognize our input into that. And so then we start to look, that's when the affairs step in, and that's when these other things start to happen.
Right.
And it's when those moments when you have that pit in your stomach going, do I really want to make that choice?
Right.
And so we have this internal guidance system that tells us when we're off course. And if we just trusted that and live authentically and in alignment with who we are, with our values, solid values,
right,
not pretend values that,
Yeah.
well, she doesn't like me anymore. So then we think that that's going to be a value, and really how we've been showing up for the last 5, 10, or however long years has really impacted the way the relationship has flourished or not. And so I think it's important that we recognize those pieces. How do we participate? How did we play into that relationship and into our lives? And then we can build a plan from there.
That's awesome. I mean, it's good to have a solid foundation with that. Tell us about, if you will, you have the Revolutionary Man podcast, right?
Yeah.
And it's the values of that, because that ties in with your Awakened Man Band of Brothers website. So how does that all fit together? I mean, you got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I started the Revolutionary Man podcast. I had started the podcast. I wasn't really sure if I was going to be into podcasting. And so I just started doing it, and it was called something else in the early days. And then I committed 2 years ago that I'm going to do a podcast a week and really dive into really inviting guests on my show that touch these 6 pillars I talked about earlier, and helping men expand and learn different perspectives. And on top of that, also wanting to have hear their hero story. So I always have 2 questions for every guest. And the first one's always about their hero's quest, a time in their life when they knew things had to change. It was a dark moment, and what did they do, and how did that transform them into who they are? Because I think they may not, my story might not resonate with everybody, and maybe yours doesn't, but somebody's telling their story will help us see that, you know what, we all struggle with the very similar things, and it's just a different way to go at it. So I use the podcast as an opportunity to help men grow and understand and learn something else about their life that they may not have considered. And so we do that. I do my own once in a while solo, but I've been finding now that into my two and a half years now that I so much enjoy the guests that come onto my show. I'm learning a lot.
Right.
The networking opportunity of, being on shows like yourself and having folks on is just, it's just so expanding. And I think the podcast is just the way to do that. I've turned the radio off in my car, and I have probably a dozen podcasts that roll through, and it's just a great way to learn and expand and hear real conversations going on.
Right. I think that's important. Yeah, it's not canned information, but real conversations coming from people's hearts and everything. So tell us, tell people where they can get a hold of you, your website and all that, so we make sure we have that information for them.
Absolutely. They can even go to the awakenedman.net, and you'll see right at the very top of the page, there's a clarity consultation opportunity. Click that button. It's a 15 minute or 30-minute consultation. I'm pretty sure it's going to go much longer than that. That's okay. It's an opportunity for us to touch base, talk a little bit about what's going on in your life, and seeing if there's a fit. Are you ready to make that change today? And maybe if the timing isn't right, then I can at least provide you with a tool or something that leaves you with, so that at least your life can move forward. So go to the awakenedman.net. It's the best place to find me.
Great. Well, Alain, thank you so much today for being a guest on the Encouragement Engineering podcast. I really appreciate the information. I know our guests, and it'll help them to see some insight. They can get a hold of you, follow you. So thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Bob, thanks so much for having me on the show. I really enjoyed it today.
Great. Thank you. You have a great one.